Hello, everyone. Welcome back from our lunch break. I was just saying, I did scoff down my lunch. I'm feeling a little bit sick, but very excited. We have Tanuja and Amit with us here today, and this is one of my favorite sessions. It's really quite fun to have a little bit of a closer look at the career journey and experiences that our finance leaders, in not-for-profit spaces have experienced. As always, feel free to jump into the chat. Any questions you'd like to ask, experience, if you've also, you can share it, anything you want, just get involved. So yeah, it's a pretty low-key, easygoing chat. Bit of housekeeping. This will go for around 30 to 40 minutes. We will be recording and we can circulate it as well. So you'll receive that over the coming few days. That's about it. So we'll jump into it. So maybe starting with you, Amit, if you could just give us a quick overview of your career to date and perhaps a key milestone or something that you've experienced.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Adriana. Hi, Tanuja. I'm an accountant by trade. So I started working public practice a long time ago, small and sort of mid-tier firms. Realized it wasn't really for me. Took a career break, went overseas and ended up working in a sort of multinational publishing company in Toronto in Canada. Pretty dying industry. And when I came back to Australia, worked out I wanted to do the complete opposite, and I landed in tech, working with a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, startup businesses out of fish burners, which back then I think still is Australia's largest co-working space. So I created a firm, the startup shop out of there, that's now formed into a company called Guild, multidisciplinary accounting, tax, legal, and wealth. But it's really through the co-working space that I also sort of started my journey working with NFPs, working with fish burners, just really amazed at what they were doing with the community, fostering startups with Startup Oz and now the Technology Council, and a couple of others that are spun out of that. And in terms of achievement, fish burners, when I first started working there was 200 people in sort of a really grungy place in Ultimo. But if anyone's been there recently, if they're in Sydney or have visited, it's now in this sort of beautiful 11 York Street at Wynyard. Had I think initially 600 seats, and just being part of the really great team to be able to get state government funding to be able to increase the outreach and the impact was really amazing.
Yeah, that's great. I guess you often don't think of, or maybe it's me just being ignorant, but the tech and convergence with not-for-profit. So yeah, really interested to dive into that with you. Tanuja, how about you? Could you just give us a little bit of an overview of your career to date?
Yeah, sure. I'm an accountant as well. I started my career with a greenfield print media company right after I qualified as a chartered accountant back in India. And it was a fresh new newspaper that had gone a few years old. And if I wasn't a chartered accountant, I would have done mass communication. And I thought that was a very good start to my career. It didn't last just over a year. And that's not where my passion lied, I guess. And I moved to CFO consulting organization. It was one of the fastest growing CFO consulting back home. And I think that was one of the employments that kind of shaped my career and what I am today, where I got massive experience in various industries, right from clinical research organizations to tech companies and payment gateway companies. And when I came down in Australia in 2015, my first real full-time job I landed was in the not-for-profit sector. And I started exactly opposite to what Amit just said. I started into a grassroots community organization, which was then called the Exodus Foundation. Now it's called the Reverend Bill Cruz Foundation. And that's where I learned everything about not-for-profit sector within the Australian community. And currently I'm working as a CFO with St. Basil's, NSW and ACT. We are an aged care provider into home care, independent living, aged care, all sorts of aging journey. And I think one of the milestones was working with the CFO consulting firm. And I think the other very important part of my career, which I love telling people, is getting a promotion as a CFO. My first role as a CFO in Sydney, in Australia, was when I was pregnant. So my boss gave me this promotion knowing I was pregnant.
Awesome.
And before I
Unusual.
signed that contract, absolutely unusual. And I was nervous signing that contract. And I went again into his office with the contract and go, Bill, before I sign this, you need to remember I'll go in on maternity leave for a year in within 7 or 8 months. And he looked straight in my eyes and goes, that's why it's important, because I want you to come back. I don't want you to lose into motherhood and never come back.
Dream.
And absolutely. And yeah, I just felt so blessed in that point in time of the way I was being looked after. And yes, I think if it was anybody else or that opportunity didn't come, just like so many women, motherhood and being on mat leave puts a little bit of a break on your career, which this time it didn't for me, for good reasons. That's what, yeah.
Wow. Well done.
So good.
Thanks. Flipping going the other end of the spectrum, maybe, Emma, could you share maybe a challenge that you have encountered throughout your career and perhaps how you navigated that?
Yeah, sure. I think so. I mentioned when I was in Canada, I worked for a big publishing multinational, and I think I went into it thinking all finance roles were going to be similar, or organizations would be similar. But publishing on the downhill at a time where they hadn't worked out how to monetize ads or monetize readership, and it was a role that was sort of based around letting people go, really bad culture, and so I definitely wanted to gravitate away from that. I think it's also been true of some of the NFP experiences that have been as well. There are some places that are not progressive. And it's difficult. It's difficult to change the culture. It's difficult sort of being in a place where you feel like you maybe can't have the impact that you want, or that sort of the old school way of doing things leads the way.
And Tanuja, how about you? Reflecting on your career, is there any notable mistake or setback that you've sort of faced, and were you able to spin that into a bit of a key learning?
Yes, I think my personal nature is that I'm an introvert, right? I used to be socially very awkward when I started working. One of the reasons you become an accountant, I assume, is because you like being with your numbers, because numbers are not moody. They tell you what they do. So I think my biggest challenge, and to date, it is that whole stakeholder relationship. And more importantly, in the not-for-profit sector, the range of people that you deal with is just amazing. It's massive. Like the corporate world, you're not dealing with rational people where you go with your numbers, you tell them the story, you reject a marketing plan or you accept a marketing plan on the basis of the numbers. I think managing stakeholders, right from the people you help, the people you serve, who are at the core, to your governance bodies like your board and the policymakers and the commission or the governance bodies. I think that's very challenging for me, especially coming from an introvert angle. How do I navigate it? I think is by being genuinely interested in people, by studying people, by observing dynamics. And I think it's an advantage that you're an introvert, because you sit there and you watch people talk, you observe people talk, and their gestures and how people deal with in a certain circumstances. It gives me that advantage of calculating and then managing stakeholders in a way from that learning. So, and it remains a challenge for me even today. I think it's massive in the not-for-profit sector.
I've had the opposite in that, as you can tell, I'm probably a bit of an extrovert. So I've had to really just be like, no, just sit, just be quiet, just watch, don't react. It's been a journey for me, but I'm getting there.
And it's been a journey for me. I think there's no ideal person there.
I mean, I'd love to jump into, you've got experience in both nonprofit and in tech. Is there any sort of valuable insights or practices that you've brought from your tech companies into your role in the nonprofit space?
Yeah, definitely. And maybe not even my companies, but I've been so fortunate to be part of organizations that have had like really amazing leaders from Australia's like leading tech companies, sort of the Atlassian, Google, sort of Canva, Microsoft's. And I feel like they've brought an ethos, a sort of a quick moving, make mistakes, try things, think about the data, which isn't always commonly associated with NFPs. Also the idea of organizations that they're definitely they rely on a lot of volunteers, but in a really good way to promote community. But being able to look beyond the tenure maybe of some volunteers and think about projects that might be scoping 2-3 years into the future. And I feel like there's an old school thinking in NFP around like you sort of whatever you make, that sort of is what you should be spending. You don't need to make money. It's about delivering as quickly as possible. But I feel like through some of the people I've been lucky enough to work with, they've brought an idea of what is the long-lasting impact that we want to have as an organization, and being able to look at goals sort of maybe beyond the 12 months at any given time.
And how about you, Tanuja? Was there anything that you, prior to stepping into your nonprofit role, anything that you think was, a key learning?
I think everything was a key learning. As soon as you enter the not-for-profit world, it's an altogether a different ballgame. And right from learning resourcing to using the right language when you are in this sector, I've come a long way, because on my day when I was talking about profits and losses, and my boss rightfully would correct me, it's a surplus, or it's not profit, it's surplus. So I think the journey's been amazing, and we've come a long way in the not-for-profit sector in the way that we do run organizations now more professionally, as much as we do rely on volunteers. But there are younger professionals who choose to be part of the sector, while years ago they would be just, a bunch of old people who believed in the cause, who had something passionate to deliver, or had a personal connection, would actually be associated to the not-for-profit. And I've seen in the last 7 or 8 years that I've been in the sector, that average age going down within the sector, which is something that we should all be very proud of.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I guess Tanuja, you spoke about, stepping out of your comfort zone in your career. Maybe Amit, I'd love to know for you, has there been, a time when you'd really have to push beyond your comfort zone? And, upon reflection, whilst it was unpleasant, did it grow you as a finance leader, or was it just an awful experience?
Also, definite introvert at heart. So I feel you on that one. It's a learned skill.
You're like, this is my growth moment.
Yeah.
This is the uncomfortable bit.
Oh my gosh, there's people in the audience. I think for me, when I first started the firm, which was about 8 years ago, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to work with entrepreneurs, and sort of it felt right, but it got very real as we started to scale and bring on people, and just knowing that there was multiple people sort of relying on an entity that was sort of bigger than myself, and I was like, well, I can take care of me, but now there's payroll, and there's clients, and there's sort of risk and insurance, and just being able to navigate that. I actually found it quite lonely for quite a lot of time, being a sole practitioner. It sort of led me on the journey to partner up to feel where I am today. But I think being able to overcome that, sort of be in the trenches, form relationships, really, really great relationships, and sort of be there for other people, both sort of mentally and professionally, has been amazing, and sort of that's led me to sort of a network, like a really incredible network that I have today, and many of whom are sort of called dear friends, but not always easy along the way.
Now, this is, I guess, a quick yes, no, but it's a part A, part B. So if your first answer is no, then there is no part B for you. So In your career, both of you, have you had sort of mentors or role models that have had sort of an impact on your professional development?
After you.
Absolutely. I've had multiple mentors, and throughout my journey, right from the beginning, internal mentors, external mentors, I've done structured mentoring programs by CP Australia. So yes, absolutely.
Okay. Can you share some of the wisdom or lessons or sort of advice that you have received that might sort of continue to guide you and maybe might be beneficial to the team here?
Yes, absolutely. I think before I go to that, I'm a big advocate of telling people you should have mentors in whatever capacity you are, whatever stage you are, whatever age you are. It's always helped me. And this piece of advice, I think, that I continue to implement every day of my life has come from a very short-term mentoring, like the structured one that I was talking about. And we only had one goal. The only one goal was for me to make a decision whether to leave my current job or to stay in my current job, right? That it was a very emotional, very long, painstaking journey, but the thing that that mentor taught me, and I wanted a stranger who had no background of my life and could provide me right mentoring, was around self-management skills. And as much as we focus all of our energies into managing up and managing down and managing our peers, he kept reminding me, he would just ask questions, right? It was like a counseling session where he would ask a question, peel a layer, ask another question, peel another layer. And I would sit there sweating, almost ready to cry. Why is he asking me these questions? But I think he was, in a way, teaching me self-management and going, you are not able to make that decision for yourself because you are not spending enough time watching yourself. And this happens like every day. You're in an intense meeting, or you're in a difficult board meeting, or in a difficult executive meeting, and our immediate reactions are to respond immediately without thinking or get passionate or emotional. And it's almost a skill of watching yourself in that moment before you. It's kind of an opportunity to self-introspect and then manage what you do. It kind of comes to me naturally, partially, but when it comes to your own biases, it doesn't come to you naturally. So I think one biggest advice that I use every day in every difficult meeting is remind myself to take myself away from myself and look at myself acting, a part of self-management skill, and that's really helped me a lot.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amit, how about you? Well, firstly, part A, have you ever had a mentor?
Also been blessed to have a couple of really, really great mentors over the years. Yeah, absolutely.
Congratulations. You get part 2 or B, wherever we're at.
Yeah.
What words of wisdom can you share with us?
I'll give you a quick one from a board member who I used to work with. And I felt like I always used to present sort of the financials, and they were really not interested. But then afterwards, they used to have lots of criticisms, which is super frustrating. I was like, but you didn't read it; it's all in there. But they came and took the time, quite a lot of time afterwards, to sort of go through it, and they really taught me the idea of numbers being more than reports and being narrative. And even one of the sort of values in sort of our business today is to simplify. And it's like, what's the easiest way of presenting this to people who may not be financially literate, or who may not have time, or who just want to have just the headline? And the idea of almost storytelling out of numbers is something that this person was incredibly good at, but it's always stuck with me as sort of kind of defining what it is that we do.
We've actually done a few sessions on, financial storytelling and being comfortable presenting numbers to the board. So I might direct you guys to some of the other masterclasses that we've done. We might send that out as well. But you could probably sniff around on our resources and track them down. So we've had a few masterclasses on that. So if you are interested in diving into it and improving in that area, I highly encourage you to go and have a look at that. No one asked me, but I have a little comment to make, which is not really about what have you received from a mentor, but obviously I'm not in the finance team. I work in our I'm in our leadership team, but I work in marketing and in growth. But don't tell him I said this, but I like to think that our CFO is my mentor. And so I guess the message is that you might actually be surprised. I wouldn't really think that marketing and a CFO would, be the natural, mentor-mentee relationship. But for those of you that are sitting in that CFO seat, you might be surprised how much impact that you can have by forming those relationships and helping them. So highly encourage you guys to have a chat to them. They'll be so appreciative. But enough about me. Tanuja, I'd love to know, we've touched on a few of these, but maybe do you think there's an area of expertise or a specific skill that has made you so successful, or basically made your boss say, I need to give you this promotion now because I don't want to lose you? Do you think there are things that have really made you stand out?
Yes, I think it's not just one thing. It's probably a combination of a few things. As much as I'd like to say I've got a nice personality, but that wouldn't work. I really don't. But no, I think it's honesty. When you're working in that level, I think bringing that transparency into governance is really very important. And that's what I do all the time. You go back to the board, you go back to your bosses and tell them the bad news right away as it is, right? You don't try to cover up. Most CFOs usually try to give a good news story and try to sugarcoat things. In a way, my personality is such that I just go and blur it out as it is. And that transparency is something that over the years I've realized people have really appreciated. And the other thing is working collaboratively. Because of my experience working in various industries for a very short period of times, I go into an organization and I try to understand how the organization works first before I go back and tell you need to improve this, that, the other. And that requires a lot of time, spending a lot of time breaking silos. And I think the biggest success factor for us, or for a finance person, is breaking those organizational wide silos, especially in the not-for-profit sector, where these silos could be formed by managers who are not really management managers, but they could be specialists in their own fields and eventually become managers. They could be GPs, they could be counselors, they could be nurses or clinicians. And so to break those silos, and like Amit was saying, telling them the story that sits behind those numbers is so important. And now people call it business partnering, right? That's all over the place. And I think that business partnering of inclusion and collaboration defines the success or the failure of an accounts or a finance team as a whole, not just a CFO, because you don't want to be that corner office. Accountants are always cranky and they only do payroll. People are nice to us on the payroll day, and on the other time, we are grumpy old cranky accountants. So I think the success lies in being more collaborative.
How about you, Amit? Any specific skill or area of expertise you think you've
I think it's a soft skill, like more than a technical thing. Just having like big energy and passion. For a long time now, like I really love this, and I think back. I have a story. We used to work with an executive chef. He used to be like a chef for sort of billionaires on yachts, and he used to have us over for a meal. But he'd be up at 5 a.m. prepping. He'd cook, and then he'd also do all the dishes. And this kind of rationale behind it is like you just have to love all of it, and not all of it's good. But if you're in it, like you just sort of own all of it. And I sort of think about that a lot in accounting. That not all of it's good, but if you sort of think about your impact and you really enjoy all of it, some days are crap and some interactions aren't amazing, but that's okay. Like you sort of, I think people talk about like accounting being so boring, and I feel if you didn't enjoy it, it would be terrible. It'd be the worst job ever. But if you enjoy it, if you like it, if you sort of like being part of sort of the decision making and helping inform people and helping businesses do better, it's really great. And that energy, I think it's infectious. and it can make a big difference in organizations that you work in.
Mm. Tanuja, you touched on mentor programs, which are, quite structured. Do either of you have any suggestions or resources that you've used or relied on, and good training or anything like that you think might be helpful to the team here? I say team, I mean the community, basically.
Absolutely. Look, we are all either CAANZ accountants or CP Australia accountants. Both of these bodies do. CP Australia actually does a special not-for-profit mentoring program. That's how I registered for the structured one. Networking, go out, meet with people. And if you think you have a skill to learn or you have a problem within yourself to tackle, always feel free to directly approach people and go, hey, hi, I met you there and I would love to start a conversation with you. And trust me, people are always willing and happy to help 80% of the time. 20% they're too busy to invest in a mentoring program. But yeah, there are lots of structured program, but in an unstructured way, feel free to approach people and ask them for help and say, would you like to be my mentor? And it just works. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I would say.
Yes.
No, I would second that. Just to say that people have reached out to us before, and I've definitely reached out to other practitioners or just people in industry. And for the most part, if sort of schedules work out, people have been really generous with their time. And it doesn't have to be structured. I think that's actually quite important. It can be a coffee. It can be like, look, every now and then, if I have a question, would you mind? Just building that kind of network up is pretty invaluable because there's always people to help.
Anything beyond mentorship? Do you primarily go to your associations or anything else that you recommend people reading up or going to?
ChatGPT has all of the answers. No, actually, well, some of the answers.
Oh, lovely. Love it.
We can edit that
I
out
heard
later.
that it can be a bit inaccurate.
It can be a bit inaccurate.
Like,
yeah,
quite
don't
inaccurate.
Some of the answers.
It's still a baby. It'll get there.
It's a baby. It's a cute little chatty baby. All right. Well, final question, unless there's anything else that anyone specifically wants to ask from the audience. But this is to both of you, I guess. What advice would you offer to finance professionals who are currently working or aspiring to work in the nonprofit sector? Or maybe looking to get that next promotion. So yeah, what's your advice to the up and comers? This is your moment to be a bit of a mentor.
Please, Tanuja, after you.
Okay, always. I think the first thing I tell people is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And I think that was one of the advices Beth gave in the morning session as well, Adriana, when she said, don't be afraid of failure, right? Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to ask. And don't be afraid of yourself. Believe in yourself that you can take that next step. And most of the times that in the not-for-profit world, I'm still learning every day. I've been in the sector for 8 years and I still learn new things every day. And there are so many things you learn on the job while you are doing the job. So the biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid. Take up that next opportunity or ask for that promotion. If you see that position vacant, go talk to your boss that you could do that role, even if it is, a trial or in an active capacity for a while. And not-for-profit sector, it's just amazing. In my first role within the not-for-profit sector, I was recruited as a finance manager or whatever. And then I started doing everything. I was leading IT, I was leading fundraising, I was leading so many things within the organization, running projects. So I think it's just about believing in yourself and saying, yes, I can do it. And not being afraid of failure. You have to take that first step. And if you fail, you learn.
I'm going to piggyback off that. If anyone would like to be involved in these types of summits, don't be afraid. Just reach out. Get involved. Over to you, Amit.
I would say possibly controversially, but anyone looking to sort of do work in the NFP sector, one, definitely do it, but also like sort of broaden the reach of what NFP is, and I sort of go back to the idea of impact and the sort of true benevolent institutions and that sort of like teaching and sort of Doctors Without Borders and things. There's community-led organizations that are not necessarily for like sort of 100% public good, but for the community good. And then there's also private organizations, and a lot of Australia's businesses today, whatever purpose they might have not-for-profit arms or community arms or venture arms. And there's a lot of social good to be had. I think in terms of where an individual fits in, it's worth sort of working out what impact it is that you want to make. And if you want real direct impact, you don't need to work at a mega organization. There's sort of small organizations doing localized things, still really amazing. And as Tanuja's kind of pointed out, you can do lots of things there. Or to be part of like a bigger organization who's making maybe a bigger impact, but you have less of an individual contribution. And that's okay too. It's no different necessarily to sort of working out what other industry job you might want to have. Think about your skill set, think about sort of what drives you and the purpose and how you can have the most impact that aligns with you, and sort of align the organization you sort of target from there, because they are different. And I really like small firms. I like sort of wearing lots of hats, because otherwise I think I'd get super bored. But it's maybe not the most productive use of some people's time. Like some people are like, look, I'm great at this. I want to do this all the time. And so, yeah, just know yourself and then, yeah, to the first thing, just go for it.
Thank you so much, both of you. I am very much appreciative of your time and sharing, a lot about your story. Next up in the summit, we have Unlocking Governance from Burden to Benefit. So just tune in for that one. Again, I've enjoyed it. I loved it. I will speak to you both soon. Have a lovely day.
Thanks, Adriana.
Thank you, Adriana. Thanks, man. Bye.